array reduce method is similar to all other methods, so you can actually implement all other methods like for each, map, all these methods, filter method, you can implement using reduce. Say I have numbers array 10, 20, 30. Now I want to find some of these numbers. So with normal for each loop, what we do is we loop through that individual element and then we add like this, sum equal to 0. Then we can use numbers dot for each, then we'll get individual value, and then we'll see sum plus equal to value. Here we can print that sum. So you can see you get that sum of those numbers. So this is for each. So instead of using for each, we can use array reduce method also. So numbers dot reduce. So similar to all other methods accepts gets automatically value, then index, and then array, the original array. Here it's bit different only for reduce. So the first value is the initial value or previous value we can call. That's normally called as accumulator. And then actual all other are same. So value, index, array. So this is the syntax. The first element you will get the initial value or the previous value. That's called as accumulator. Now this is a function. And this value you can pass as a second parameter. So all other methods accept only one parameter, which is a callback function. For reduce, you can pass two values. First is a function and second is the initial value, let's say 0. So let me bring this back. So this is how the syntax looks. So first is function which automatically get these values, and second is the optional initial value you can pass. So now I want to sum, I want this sum to be initialized to 0. So by default, initially this sum should be 0. So that's what I'm saying. Initial value of this variable, whatever variable you are sending, that should have a value of 0. Now I want to increment this value. So what you can do, you can just return this value. So accumulator plus value. So we are using only 2. So let's remove this. So how this works? So initial value is 0. Then during each iteration of these numbers, you will get the next element. So this accumulator, initially accumulator will be 0 and value will be 10. So the sum will be accumulator plus value equal to 10. So this will be the return value. So you need to make sure you are returning that value. So it's like a static variable. If you work with Java, you know that static variable, the value remains for entire lifetime. So for during entire iteration of that loop, you can access that previous value. So whatever you return from this function will be available during next iteration. So this 10 value I am passing, it will be now value of accumulator next iteration. So the accumulator value will be 10, actual value will be the next element from that array, which is 20. Now sum equal to, let me add this, 0 plus 10, and here 10 plus 20 equal to 30. So this will be the now final value which will be returned from here. Now again, during third iteration, you will have previous value, which is the accumulator. So you can call it anything. I can call it previous also. The previous 30. Now value is again 30, and sum equal to 30 plus 30, 60. Now during next iteration, previous value is 60. Now value equal to current value, what will be the 40. Sum will be 60 plus 40, which is equal to 100. So this is the final sum you will get. Let me comment this out, and if I store this in variable print this. You can see you correctly get this 100 value back. So this is this works like a remembering the previous value. So whatever value you are passing will be added, will be available in the previous variable, and the original value which you are looping through will be available as a second parameter. So reduce method, what value it returns? So if you check the for each method does not return anything. Even you add something here, it will not be returned. Some will be undefined. So you can see you get some undefined. With map, you will get that individual value. So whatever you want to return, but it will always give the array. So this will not have previous value. So when you are using map method, whatever you want to return or transform, that you want to update that value, that will be updated. So I am adding 1 to that. But with map, with reduce, you decide what you want the output. So with map you get array, with filter you get again true or false, elements of those array, so which are matching that particular condition. But with reduce you decide what you want the output to be. So in this case I want output to be sum of those numbers, previous plus value. You get 100, and that is a number. Now sum is a number, so now you don't need to pass that initial value. So all these are numbers. So when you don't pass any initial value, previous will have that first element as the value. So during first iteration it will be not 0 plus 10, it will be 10 plus 20. So it will have 30 value. During second iteration, it will have 30 plus 30, 60. And next iteration, 60 plus 30, it will 60 plus 40, it will be 100. So when you don't pass anything, it will be the first element value will be used. But if you pass that, that will be the initial value you can use. So you don't have to use this only. So let's say I have users array, name Mike, age, name Alex, now let's say I want all those names in an array. So what you can do is you normally easily you can use map method. So you will get individual user and you can just return user.name. So you will get those names in an array, Mike, Alex, J. Now you can do this using reduce methods. So all the other methods you can implement using reduce. So you will get the previous value, then the current value, index also. Now you want to return. So what you want to return? So you want to add that array. So what you can do is you can add an initial value of empty array. And now this will come as a previous. So in previous, you just push that value. So this, let me just push first. You will push that value. So instead of value, we can call it name or user.name. So here you are returning user.name. So I am pushing now user.name to the previous, this variable which is currently initialized to empty. Now I will return this previous. So returning is important. If you don't return, next time it will have undefined value. So now I can print this. You can see you get exact same output. So what you are doing, you are initializing an array that will go as a previous variable, and then you are just pushing these individual names. So this user will be this object first time. During second iteration, it will be this object. So each object you are taking name of that particular object. and you are returning this previous. So if you don't return previous, you can see cannot read of push. So during first iteration it works, but during second iteration this previous is undefined because you are not returning. So you are using push method of undefined, so you get error. Reduce method, you must return something. So as you have seen here, the result is a number, sum of those numbers. Here result is an array, so you decide what you want result to be. So now failed, true, these are two students, three students are failed and one student is passed. So what we can do is, I want to find out how many students passed the exam and how many failed. So what I can do is, I can use students dot reduce. I will get previous value, then individual student. Yes. So I have an object with initial value of fail 0 and pass 0. So I want how many students are passed and how many failed. So how can I calculate that? So during each iteration, this will be having a previous value. So initially this will be previous value, and then each individual student, this is object which come as a student. Now inside this, I can check. So if previous, if I can say student dot failed is equal to true, then what I want to return. So if you see here, here we are having initial value of array, so we always return an array. Here if you see, we have initial value of 0, so always return a number. So in this case we have initial value of object, so you need to make sure you are returning an object. So I will create an object. Now it should have the same property. So if student is failed, then failed count, what will be the fail count? So the previous value dot failed count plus 1. So now if the student is failed equal to true, then I will increment that failed count, and for past count I will keep it as it is. So whatever the previous past count, I will keep it as it is. But if the student is not failed, in the else condition, what we need to do is failed count will remain as it is, because student is now passed, because failed equal to true. If failed is true, then this code will execute, and failed is false, then this code will execute. So when it's not failed, then you will have fail count as it is. I will just increment the pass count in this case. Now if I log this, you can see now we have two fails and two pass students, because failed is true for two students and for two students is false. So if I make it true, now there are three students who are failed. So fail 2 is for three students. So you can see fail count is 3 and pass count is 1. So that's how you can use reduce method to return anything. So you need to remember that you need to provide initial value that you always need to return. Always return something from that reduce method. And you decide what you need to return from that particular reduce method. Based on that, you provide the initial value. And you need to remember that you need to remember that reduce method always returns a single value. So if you see here, you get a single value of sum, which is a number. You get a single array in this case. So if you see here, you have a single array which is coming. In this case, you have single object. So reduce method always returns a single value. So even if you can have multiple properties inside this object, but at the outside it's just a single value. With reduce, you always remember the previous value, so it works like a static variable which will remember its value for the entire lifetime of that particular loop. During each iteration it will remember that previous value, which is a good thing. So you don't need to create a separate sum variable and then add it. So it will avoid creating global variable. So you have a global variable, so this initial value works as a global variable. So this array, you have initial value of empty, so you don't have to declare that. So if you want to declare, you can do that. So if I have sum equal to empty array, so sum1, I already have sum, so that's not possible. Let me comment this and make it sum. So I have defined sum of empty array, then you can use that variable here. That is also allowed, but there is no use of creating separate variable. Instead, you can directly pass that empty array.